How did you guys meet and how did you get into franchising?
Okay, so I am Tenisha Patterson Brown. My husband is Everette Brown. We met in college at Florida State University, and when he was drafted to the Panthers, I went to law school. So he was a rookie, and I was a 1L law student. Um, we I started Definitive Sports when I was at Florida State because I wanted to help athletes become businessmen outside of, off the field. I saw the need. And initially I was like convincing Everett, like, you need to be more than an athlete. Hard to do to convince a rookie that he should focus on something other than football. So honestly, it was a tough sale. However, when he was about 25, he started to actually think about, hey, what can I do life after football? Because his career was significantly different than what he envisioned it to be. He thought that he was going to be with the Panthers for a long time. Him and Julius Peppers are from the same area. His first NFL game was when Julius was playing for the Panthers. So honestly, he was now playing on the same team with Julius. So he was like, I'm going to be like Julius, and I'm going to be playing for this long time, right? And it didn't pan out that way. So he was looking for something that was going to be a little bit different. And we love Tropical Smoothie. We're from Tallahassee. When we went to school in Tallahassee, and we saw, Tropical Smoothie everywhere because that's where it originated. And there was no Tropical Smoothie in Charlotte. And we're like, what is happening here? We're going to solve this problem. And honestly, we just started to research about the brand. At the time, Everett was still playing. And I had just graduated from law school. And I was like, man, we can invest in this. We were projected to be absentee owners, which was necessary because obviously Everett was still playing and he was in Dallas at the time. And so we researched the brand, realized we already like the product, right? So we can be an easy sell. We can sell the brand to people because we love the product. And the process was about 6 to 8 months from initial interest, figuring out if it was going to work, finding location, being the first location in Charlotte, and then to opening in November of 2013.
So you mentioned that Everett was playing in Dallas. I think you guys now are in Florida. So how did you decide to open the location in North Carolina?
So we lived in Charlotte.
Hmm.
I still live there. So I was still in Charlotte. Our home base was Charlotte. Even when he played in other cities, I never moved. And so that was critical to have just like a base there because we had to build. Even though Tropical Smoothie was a franchise, I don't know if you're familiar with Charlotte market, but Charlotte is tough, right? It's trying to be a city. It was trying to be a city at a time, a big city, but in reality, it was a small town. And so introducing the Eat Better, Feel Better concept was something that you had the Sonics and the other brands that were more McDonald's and Burger King, and trying to introduce something into a market that just wasn't familiar with that. We needed boots on the ground. So for me to leave wasn't realistic. So I stayed, and we opened that location. And as he moved from team to team, I never moved. So, and then we ended up circling back because he ended up coaching for the Panthers. And so it just even more like worked out as far as like having that. We've owned it. It'll be 11 years this on the 25th. So next week.
Oh, mentioned like in your introduction that you like also work with athletes, like advise them on, kind of like what to do next after their career, like in the NFL is over. And you mentioned like teamwork, like, the importance of going into business, like with a team, like with someone. So you guys are like, in business together. So if you share a little bit, like how that's been, like how did you decide to do it and how it's going?
So honestly, I'm going to do full transparency. I had no desire to be in the restaurant industry. I was like, what are we talking about? I was like, Everett, I'll do this and support you, but I really don't want to do this. But then as I realized, like, man, there needs to be a support system. I strongly encourage him and all of my clients, you absolutely need to have a team because realistically, it's just so many different parts that comes with franchising. And I will say, if you have no experience whatsoever in business, franchising is the way to go because there is a blueprint, right? And you're not going to just start off not knowing anything. I learned so much from franchising, and I was able to go off and create my own brand here in Florida. And so because of my experience with the franchising, but I always say to my athletes, like, I'm your coach. So let me give you the game plan to help you in your process, but make sure you build a team around you for longevity. And then also have an exit strategy, right? So what are you building this for? Are you buying these franchises for a retirement plan? Is it an investment? Is it something for you to do off the field where you're like, I'm going to transition straight from playing, take some time off, and then go and work in these, whatever the franchise is, because there are athletes that do that. But I always say, have a team that's going to manage your money, help the business's money, not your money personally, but the business's money. Have a CPA that is going to do your taxes. And then also have a team that is going to, if your employees don't show up, make sure that you can have someone that can check in on your businesses for you and hold people accountable.
So it seems like the Charlotte community was somewhat important to you guys. And you mentioned that like the concept Tropical Smoothie like really spoke to you. So I guess like what's the role of community in like growing this business, and how have you guys like approached working with the local community in Charlotte?
I would say what helped tremendously with us creating Tropical Smoothie and the name for Tropical Smoothie in North Carolina was really the fact that my husband was from North Carolina. And then also that he played for the Panthers. So it was like, just like if you were in your collegiate town, right, and you go back and you open something or create something there, that fan base will support you. And that's what really carried us. We opened in the winter, which is not the best time to open a smoothie place, right? But it's just the time it just worked out that way. And really, the Panthers were very supportive towards us. And the fan base, they were very supportive, and they continue to be. We cater the training camp. They, pour into us simply because of the fact that he played there. So reaching back with those connections is huge, right? And I think a lot of times I tell my athletes, like my clients, that you have to use the connections that you've made. You've built a network of people, whether it's in your collegiate career, whether it's your hometown, or where you played, because every city that you played in, you have that connection, right? So as they go back to these Legends events and everything, make sure that you're connecting and tap in. Like, I want to, whatever your business is, have those people support. Connect with your local chapter, NFLPA chapter. Connect with the wives there, because that's where the money is, right? The wives are the ones that spend the money. And make sure that you are tapping into your network that you built while you played, so that when you have these businesses, that the longevity is there. Because that's the end game. You're not trying to just open something and have it close the next week. Like, that's a waste of money. But it's just making sure that you're getting back into the community, and then also having a give. Because even though we make money off of Tropical Smoothie, our give back was helping some of our employees, have college scholarships, right? That was not a program that Tropical Smoothie does, but we created it on our own, where we were like, no, we want to help them, go to college, because at the end of the day, that's the whole point, right? It's to serve and give back, but also make sure that we are giving opportunities for people who normally would not have those.
Obviously, you guys launched like over 10 years ago, so a long time ago, but what was Tropical Smoothies like support as you were launching? And it looks like maybe you have a second store, so what's their role in supporting you?
So when we first opened, it was a huge support, right? Because they wanted Tropical Smoothie I would say Tropical Smoothie is a young franchise. So even though it was established in 1997, there was established by an individual, like one person got together like with his friend and was like, hey, we're going to just create this franchise. Now, this is where the research of the franchise is totally important, right? Because if you're going into a situation where your franchise is super young and you don't have a system in place, a corporate system that's in place that can essentially provide you with the resources that you need to excel, it makes it harder. Tropical Smoothie, we've grown with Tropical Smoothie. So they started off with a very small corporate office. I mean, super, super small. And their marketing team was like one person, which is crazy to think about that. It was roast beef sandwiches and like, smoothies. Like that's so random and like from far from each other. The menu was insane. It had so many parts, but they wanted to get into the athlete space. They knew that athletes, obviously if you look at people like Magic Johnson and Shaquille O'Neal, who have all of these locations of like different franchises, they wanted to be a part of that. Like, how do we get into the athlete space? And so Everette was really one of the first athletes to, I think, if not the first, I think he was their first athlete to purchase a Tropical Smoothie franchise. And then since then, more players have purchased franchise locations in different states. But the brand itself had a slow, like, aging process, I should say. And now the support is, it's been sold twice, but the infrastructure is better now than what it was before.
Like hiring, like managers or just like staff that work. So I think a lot of times, like prospective franchisees are like very afraid of dealing with that, and people come and people go. So how have you dealt with it?
So I was for the first like 8 years. Well, I would say 7 years of us owning Tropical Smoothie, I was the point of contact. I was literally the in-between, because when my husband was playing, even when he was coaching, it was a necessity, because sometimes people want to get to you, right, just to have access. And so I would strongly recommend there always be a layer. Like there's somebody in between. And my husband I want to be hands-on, right? That's his thing. But the reality of the situation is that people are very, I don't know, like they're very, I wouldn't say, like wanting to connect with him because he played, but it was like very much like how can I connect with them? How can I connect with him? And so I served as the in-between. And so I recommend strongly that if you're going to go into franchising, or, when you have employees, right, is to have an in-between, have somebody that's going to be operations. And I think that's the part that is critical, that if you're willing to pay that person to be their operations, that they can serve as the person hiring employees, because you guys know that employees especially in the restaurant industry, oh my goodness, in retail, they're in and out, in and out, in and out. But if you have that consistent team, like I have a client, he has was formerly his agent, but now his business manager. That person serves as the in-between between him and everybody. So, and it is consistent across the board, and it's been consistent. And so because of that, and when I say in between, not as a sense of they don't have access to him, but it's more so of everything is filtering through copy. He's copied on everything. Like he knows, what's going on, so that if something happens, right, then there's still a buffer in between that, the player and that person. And it's a hired person, not a cousin who is just doing it as a favor, right? Somebody that your business puts on payroll to be able to do that, so that it's a consistency when connecting with people.
You work with other athletes, and I think real estate is like a common interest and like an asset class. So in your mind, kind of like, how do you compare franchising and like owning a cash flowing business and like, the real estate asset class?
So I always encourage my clients to have a diverse portfolio. But I also say that if you want to get into a business that you can connect with. Now there's two different levels, right? I have clients who are like, I want to be on the ground. I want to be a part of this. I want to get these franchises and I want to be the face. I want to do the commercials. I want to do all of that, the branding. And then you have clients who are like, I don't want to do any of that. And then they get in an investment group that owns I have a client that owns 50 Blaze pizzas, right? As a part of an investment group. Those are different, it's a diverse portfolio for them in that sense. And so I say when it comes to like real estate, be mindful when you're doing real estate. But I always encourage commercial real estate. I always encourage them, own the buildings that whatever you're leasing or buying, right? That if you're in a franchise, buy the building that your franchise is in and pay yourself rent, right? Because then you're double dipping essentially. You don't miss on that. And so, but make sure you still pay yourself, pay yourself rent. And then I think just like I said earlier with the franchising, if you are new to business, I strongly encourage them to be in a franchise system because you get to learn the steps and the processes. You don't have to, it's hard when you're like, man, I have to create an entire business plan, blueprint of how this is going to operate. And if you're mentally not at that point, or you don't have a support system that can assist you in that, then that's very difficult, especially when the player is still, if you're still playing. If you're still playing, or if you're very active, like if you're a coach, or if you're a ref, or you're in, one of the programs that the NFL provides, like for school, or training. It's difficult for you to say, I'm going to create everything from scratch, right? In theory, in concept, that makes sense. But if you have an opportunity to get into a good franchise, now some of these franchises are not good, but if you can get in with a really, really good franchise, that you've done the research, and it works for your brand and aligns with your brand, I think I encourage that, because you learn and take the time, go to the meetups, right? Go to the events that they have, go to the conferences that they have, so that you can see what this brand is truly about, because people can portray something and then it not be what it really is. Like Tropical Smoothie made it seem as if, sorry, that's my daughter, made it seem as if it was going to be an absentee situation. Like fully said, hey, it's going to be absentee. And then when it came down to it, it was absolutely not an absentee. And so it just is not possible, right? Unless you own a lot of locations. And so that's what I would say, like, as far as like be diverse in your portfolio. Don't ever put all your eggs in one basket. But I think if you don't have any level of business experience, I strongly encourage going into something that has a blueprint.
A lot of the things you talked about, like have a team, have a CPA, it all seems like, buy the building, it costs a lot of money. And there are a bunch of, athletes we talk about, a lot of them, maybe they played in the past, like they just, for whatever reason, they were doing the same work, but they weren't getting paid as much. So like, are there ways to get into franchising without spending a lot of money?
So by default, franchise, and most of them are between, especially now with inflation and the way that the times, right, and where everybody's trying to get into getting businesses, it's like at least minimum $30,000 is the entry fee, franchise fee. But this is why I said don't do stuff by yourself, because it's just not, it's riskier when you're doing that. Because if you go into buying a location and the location is $50,000, like you got to pay a franchise fee of $40,000. Okay, then they're not even thinking about the other fees, because even though you're paying the franchise fee, sometimes you have to put not sometimes, but majority of the time, if you're leasing the space, you have to put down the deposit for the space. Then you have to, if you're getting an SBA loan, strongly encourage, do not use your own money to do anything, like ever. Don't pay cash. And so that is a mistake that we made, because we're always taught, right? Oh, you don't want to use credit. You want to use your money to spend the cash. You'll have a debt-free store. We had a debt-free store, but then we ended up pouring money into our store because we underestimated, us being young, right? Underestimated how much it would cost us in the initial 3 to 6 months, because people forget about that operation. And they're like, oh, I'll be fine, right? Once I do the build out. But spending $275,000 on build out, then you're adding in the operation costs. This is why I say do the initial steps, right? And like some things are non-negotiables, right? With my clients, you have to have an attorney. That's full stop. So for me, I serve as the attorney for my clients. And I say that to protect yourself. If you are in a partnership, have a partnership agreement, full stop. Like that is a non-negotiable. I know it's like, oh, I can trust this person. Absolutely not. My husband and I have been business partners, and we have a partnership. We have an operating agreement, how we operate business. We have a partnership agreement, our partnership. We talk about every single thing that is going to happen. We equally have input on it, because at the end of the day, we want to be successful. I also say, if you're going in with a group situation, I think the misconception of like, man, I can do this by myself, right? And in theory, you can, but do you want to put yourself in a financial situation that ultimately backfires on you later, right? And so if you have the opportunity to get 2 or 3 of your teammates together to put down the franchise fees, right, and open a location together and create that group, that's less that's risk averse. And so I strongly, encourage, like, hey, get connected with the local credit union, right? Because the local credit unions are more likely to give you a business loan, than the bigger banks. Tap into your resources while you're playing. That is the biggest thing. If you have the opportunity to tap in while you're still active, it's critical, because you get way more when you're an active player versus when you're retired. Because in people's mind, they're trusting the NFL salary, right? They're trusting the backing of the NFL representation. And so I would say definitely tap into the resources that the NFL has. If they have a program, tap into it, like apply for the grants, apply for the different avenues, go to the programs that they have available that they're paying for you, because then you meet financial people that will be able to give you money. And you can also meet like-minded players who are going to say, oh, well, I'm already invested in this. You want to come in? And the entry point, for example, for us, we were giving an entry point to another player who was like, I have $10,000 or $5,000 to invest. I can't invest the full $40,000, but what can I get out of this percentage if you buy these other locations? What does that look like for me? Well, then now that person has a percentage interest in the business. And even though they couldn't go in and buy their own location, now technically they're an owner. And so that's like a way. And I think a lot of times players miss out on that because they forget about their team. They forget about their teammates, and they don't want to rely on their teammates. But the reality is, every other major sport, if you look at their former players, they always link up. Whether it's NBA, MLB is notorious for this. They get together and they create these initiatives and buy stuff all the time.
Perfect. So I think there's one about like, what do you wish you knew when you were starting with Tropical Smoothie? And I think you mentioned like a few things, but maybe just to refresh.
I wish I knew the importance of funding and not using our own money because we did. And we just didn't know. We were super young. My husband was 25 when we started the process, 26 when he finished. So, I mean, he was super young. And so the reality of the situation is that if we knew, like, the conversation, his financial advisor was not telling him, hey, this is what you need to do, because honestly, he had no idea. And that's the other thing, is having someone that knows more than just about stocks and bonds is critical, because most of these financial advisors, that's what they're going to tell you, because they make 1% off of, what you are investing. So they don't know about other, portfolios, things that you can put in your portfolio. So it was the financial piece for me. If I had to say what was the one thing I wish I would have known, I wish I would have done more research. I wish that we wouldn't have trusted just like what somebody was telling us, and would have went with like, hey, maybe it should be, even though it may take us longer to open to get this SBA funding, but we probably should have went that route instead of just spending cash, for the build out. Because it ended up being way more expensive than what we thought it was going to be, because each location is different. But at the end of the day, it would have been fine if we would have just had that level of expertise or somebody in our corner to tell us that.
Brandon has a question.
Hello, Miriam. Great job. Greg, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Tanisha, this has been awesome. Thanks for your information and taking your time out here. I want to make sure that I didn't miss. You guys own how many franchise locations at the time?
So we own two. We
Okay.
own one in Charlotte and one in South Carolina. And we've owned that. Well, the one in Charlotte we've owned for 11 years. I'm like, it's going to be 11 years next week.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
When
you.
did you think it was okay to open up another one? How, like, what was that?
We didn't do the whole build out. We actually bought an existing store, which that's a whole nother thing, right? Of just buying something that was going to have revenue immediately. That was important to us because COVID was really good to us. It was great to us. With NC18, which I'm saying NC18, like you guys know, it's our North Carolina store, because we are in Uptown Charlotte, and honestly, DoorDash and Uber Eats was huge. So our sales went crazy, right? During COVID. And so we were like, we don't want to impact those sales. So, and take the cash flow away from that. How do we build into this? And that's how we ended up buying an existing store. That is another entry point into franchising, because if you don't want to do a complete build out, right, and you just don't want to do it, right, and you want the instant revenue, there are always franchises for sale. The existing stores, every single franchise brand has existing stores for sale. Even the really hard to get ones like Dunkin' Donuts, they have stores that are for sale. And so that's also an entry point into getting it. And you can buy multiple stores at the same time, but that's where might want to get with a group to do that, because it's a huge investment.
What was the financial structure of that transaction? Did you guys use SBA funds or cash or a mixture of both? How did you work?
So we used SBA for that transaction, because we learned from the first time not to do cash, but we use, SBA requires you to put a down payment down. But it's more favorable than some of the predatory loans. I will say this to kind of hit on, and this is one of the things that I tell my clients, is be very mindful of those loans that are like, oh, we'll give you this huge cash. Because a lot of times most of the franchises partner with financial companies that have these really crazy interest rates, and they'll have you get into these loans, but the payment is like super aggressive. I strongly say, discourage those. And the reason why is because you never know what's going to happen in the market, and you want to make sure you don't put yourself in a financial situation that's unrealistic. SBA is backed by the government. Has super favorable terms as far as the term length. Take the time. And one thing that I know for sure is that once you've locked in an SBA loan, and as long as you are paying it back, you can go, they're more likely to give you another loan, increase your loan in order for you to get another location and another location, another location. So there is a franchisee, for example, in North Carolina. He started off with one store, then went to two, then he bought two at the same time. Now he has 14 stores, and all of his funding comes directly from SBA loan.
Now, I thought SBAs didn't cover acquisitions. I thought it was just mainly for cash flow and other equipment.
No, there are some programs that you can use for acquisitions.
Copy. And so does that affect your personal debt to income when you get an SBA loan?
No. So it depends. Now, once again, it depends on the program, right? So you will have to be a guarantor on anything. On any loan that you get, you're going to have to be a guarantor. So that I always say, make sure you have the best credit. If not, I think it's like a 620 that you need. Don't quote me. It's not my industry, but to even qualify. But you have to be a guarantor even on leases, right? You have to be a guarantor on the leases, because they want to make sure that they get their money. But that's where it is the layers. So I tell my clients, create the business, right? When you create the business, the people who own the business is another business, right? And then when by the time it gets to you, right, then there's at least three layers of protection before it gets to you. And so that's my strategy with one, because if you're a player, people like to Google and look up, or just go onto the websites and look up who owns what, right? And I'm always thinking, being risk averse. So I'm like, okay, please make sure that this person can't find your name, so then they can say, all right, I'm gonna slip and fall in your location. Or I'm going to, I have a couple of trucking companies, clients who have trucking companies. They're gonna say, hey, I want to pretend like this truck hit me, or they pulled out and did XYZ just because, so I can sue them. And so it's like the layers of protection, so that by the time it gets to you, it's so far down that people have essentially given up, to even find, usually people stop at the first layer. But you will have to be, to answer your question, you will have to be a guarantor, but sometimes it does not show up. Like even when you have like a business credit card, it typically does not show up on your credit.
Gotcha. So yeah, being a guarantor is cool, but I was just wondering if it came up as a personal debt to income.
No, it does not. No, it does not.
And
last question, and I'm going to let you go. I promise. I'm so sorry.
It's for you. Like, to be honest, it's for you, Brandon. Jared, feel free to.
Very much so. So if there was an acquisition that was more creative on the financing aspect of it, right, where we were acquiring a business that was an LLC structure, and we were doing a 50-50 transaction, but is it possible to be able to acquire that percentage of that LLC with another entity as opposed to your personal entity, as you being a person?
Yeah, no, you can't. So that's what I was talking about, the layers, right? Gotcha. You shouldn't. So my recommendation is to always have a layer in between. So if you're taking it, so say you create an LLC. So say you're creating, Los Angeles LLC, right? And you're creating that, then the owners of Los Angeles LLC should not be individuals, right? Because you're essentially not having a layer of protection for yourself. So the more layers that exist, so the next should be, okay, then ABC LLC and JFK LLC should own Los Angeles LLC. And then you're moving further down. And the reason why I say that is, one, because of access, okay? But two, because of risk and liability, right? You want to have other stuff that's in between, that's liable for what may or may not happen when it comes to the business.